They told us the moon was silent. They told us it was lifeless. But I was the only one who survived the landing, and I heard something knocking on my helmet. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. They don't tell you what it feels like to wake up sideways in a crash-landed space capsule with the smell of scorched polymer and blood in your nostrils. They train you for malfunctions, system failures, even sudden decompression, but they don't prepare you for the silence, the real kind. Not the quiet of space, but the quiet that lives in the moments after you realize you're the only one left breathing. My name is Commander Ria Mori, pilot of Artemis NX. There were 4 of us on board. Now, there's just me. I came to on the floor of the lander, face pressed against the inside of my helmet. The readout screamed red, mission failure, flashing in bold, unblinking letters above a slew of warnings I couldn't even process yet. My ribs ached. My left leg wouldn't move. For a long moment, I couldn't even remember how we'd gone down. The last thing I recalled was orbital insertion, then static, then the sound of something grinding, like metal teeth chewing the hull. I shifted and groaned, the pain shooting up my spine like a lit fuse. Blood floated lazily in the low gravity, speckling the inside of my helmet in a thin mist. I blinked it away and reached for the override on the suit interface. Oxygen nominal, it said in that same soft voice I'd grown to despise over the years. External environment, stable. Cabin integrity, breached. Dragging myself to the wreckage on elbows. Over Commander Khalil's seat first. His visor was cracked open. His eyes weren't where they should have been. I didn't look long. Everyone else was gone. Ejected, maybe. Dead, definitely. We were supposed to touch down near the edge of the Shackleton crater, near the southern pole. Ideal for power and permanent shadow studies. A prototype outpost, already delivered by unmanned drones, waited roughly 2 kilometers from our original landing zone. It was called Outpost Omega, a name I used to think sounded ridiculous. Now, it felt like a promise or a warning. I took one last look around the capsule before sealing my helmet. Whatever system still worked wouldn't last long. My only shot was to make it to Omega on foot. The relay beacon was toast. The antenna array torn clean off. Earth didn't know we were here, and by the time they realized, I'd either be inside the outpost or another frozen corpse dotting the regolith. The hatch hissed as I overrode the lock and forced it open. Moonlight flooded in, a harsh silver glare across a dead world. The outside was still in that way that doesn't feel peaceful. Still in that way that feels watched. I climbed out, one slow movement at a time, careful not to jostle the cracked seals on my leg or burn through too much oxygen. I stepped onto the powdery surface, boots sinking into gray dust untouched for billions of years. The stars above didn't twinkle. The sun hung like an angry eye just above the horizon. My suit HUD showed Omega's approximate direction, just under 2 kilometers north by northeast. That's when I noticed them. The tracks. They weren't rover tracks, not the tread pattern I'd trained to recognize. They were thin, sharp, like the imprint of needles dragging through the soil. But they weren't scattered like debris or from rolling equipment. No, these were deliberate, parallel, pacing in a wide, uneven arc, circling the crash site like a predator stalking a fresh kill. At first I thought maybe one of the drone scouts had malfunctioned and doubled back. Maybe part of it had survived and gone haywire. I told myself that as I limped forward, each step biting into my side. The outpost beacon flashed faintly in my visor's navigation, but the tracks were fresh, and I was certain we were the only humans on this rock. The walk to Omega took nearly 2 hours. I moved slowly, carefully. The gravity gave me lift, but also made me clumsy. More than once, I tripped and nearly face-planted, and each time I hit the ground, I waited, listening. Not for radio chatter or engine hum, but for that feeling you get when you know something else is nearby. That electric tension that crawls up your back, even when your eyes say you're alone. I reached the base of the ridge just before the main structure came into view. Outpost Omega stood like a black monolith rising from the crater's edge, low to the ground, armored, with 4 stubby modules connected by narrow tunnels. It looked smaller than I remembered from simulations. Colder, no lights on, no external power indicators, but it was intact. I keyed in the emergency override at the access port. The panel whined. The door hissed open with reluctant suction. I stepped inside, and everything went quiet. The silence inside was worse than outside. The moment the door sealed behind me, I heard everything. My own breath, my heartbeat, the creak of my suit, the buzz of dying electronics still trying to hold on to life. But there was something else too. Something I couldn't quite place. A subtle clicking sound just beyond the range of my helmet's microphones. Like fingers tapping a metal wall. I told myself it was thermal expansion. Maybe the outpost was adjusting to my presence after being dormant. Maybe. I removed my helmet, heart hammering. The air smelled stale, dry, but breathable. The central module was in standby mode, but the backup batteries had enough juice to bring up limited power. I activated life support. Lights flickered, consoles blinked to life. A soft hum filled the space like the outpost had been holding its breath. I sat there in the silence for a long time, not moving, not speaking, just listening. And that's when it happened. A faint sound, tap, like a knuckle against glass. Then again, tap, tap, right against the side of my helmet. Except my helmet was in my lap, and I was alone in the outpost. I turned, slowly. No one there, but the sound came again, this time from the airlock window. I'd approached. The outer door was sealed, as it should be, but smeared across the small circular viewport was a print. Not a hand, not a glove, something else. Like the imprint of too many fingers, long, jointed, clawed at the tips, and from the inside, I could see the moonlight casting a shadow on the other side of the door. It didn't move, it didn't breathe, but it was waiting. They say shadows don't move on the moon. No wind, no atmosphere, no clouds to distort the light. But I stood at the airlock window, staring at a shape that cast one, and it shifted when I blinked. I should have hit the emergency lockdown right then, sealed every bulkhead and powered down the lights, but instead I just stood there, dumbly, watching the distorted smear on the outer glass. It looked like a handprint, if hands had 7 fingers, all of them longer than my own forearm. The marks weren't just pressed into the frost, they were melted into it, like the thing on the other side radiated heat. Dawn stepped back, one slow movement at a time. The shadow didn't follow. I activated internal lockdown, sealing the main corridor behind me with a hiss and a dull clang. One by one, the security shutters on the viewports closed, shielding me from that thing, or maybe shielding it from me. The outpost groaned quietly as the backup system spun up. Temperature stabilized. A dull blue glow lit the corridors, cold, sterile, artificial life. I made my way to the operations terminal and sat down, still in full suit, only the helmet removed. I needed answers, and fast. The logs were corrupted. That didn't surprise me. Solar interference, radiation spikes, maybe even physical damage. But I pulled up what I could from the mission archives. Omega had been active for 17 days before we were meant to arrive. Unmanned drones delivered the modules, then ran a full system check and initialized the habitat. But the last entry in the maintenance log caught my eye. Entry Omega 017, dated redirected. Status anomaly detected. Note, external sensor drift. Seismic activity was recorded, but it was not lunar in origin. Flagged. Autonomic response initiated. Camera feeds disabled. Outer lights disabled. Recommendation: await crew for manual override. That wasn't protocol. Drones didn't make recommendations, and lunar seismic activity doesn't just appear, not with the precision those sensors are calibrated to. I flicked through the data logs. Most of it was gibberish. Spikes in radiation, magnetometer surges, signal reflections. But one recurring signature caught my eye. a low-frequency pulse, like sonar, repeating at irregular intervals. It wasn't natural, wasn't even mechanical, it was rhythmic, like breathing. At first, I told myself maybe it was a data echo from the wreck. Our lander had gone down hard, pieces could be radiating interference. But then something hit the far end of the outpost wall. Not hard, not like an impact. It was soft, deliberate, like someone knocking with one knuckle. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. My suit hissed with each shallow breath I took. The knock came again, slightly louder, this time from the tunnel leading toward the hydroponics module. I had sealed the main corridor, and yet I could still hear it. I grabbed the closest thing that could be used as a weapon, a carbon fiber tool arm from the maintenance kit, useless against a pressure breach, worse against whatever waited outside, but it felt better than empty hands. The lights flickered, just once. Then again, a second time, like a slow blink, and in that momentary darkness, I saw it, a shape, tall, wrong, folded into itself, standing at the end of the tunnel. It was only there for a second, maybe less. When the lights returned, the corridor was empty, but something was here, and it didn't care about airlocks, or sealed doors, or any rule of physics we believed about the moon. I backed into the central module, bracing the emergency hatch and engaging the internal comms array. I tried sending a ping to the relay satellite, but there was nothing. Not static, not silence, just absence. Like the entire moon had turned inward and stopped reflecting anything at all. The only system that still worked without error was the internal recorder. I started logging everything: voice memos, sensor fluctuations, timestamps. Not for mission protocol, not even for Earth. I think I just wanted something to prove I hadn't imagined it all. Log recording CMDR Fiamori, Omega Magical, entry 001. Status: unknown presence outside habitat. Airlock compromised. Sensor anomalies escalating. I'm not alone here. Not anymore. I didn't sleep. Not that night. Not the next lunar cycle. I sat with my back to the bulkhead, holding the makeshift weapon, watching the lights, and listening. Because it moved. It didn't walk or crawl. It slid through the walls, under the floor, between the seams of the station like moonlight bleeding through cracks. And sometimes it spoke, not with words, not in a way I could quote or record. It was more like a feeling, like dread being whispered directly into my spine. I heard it once while trying to reroute power. Just as I touched the interface screen, the room went cold and a pressure built behind my eyes, like something was looking out through them. It said, "You opened it, you let us in." And just like that, the temperature normalized. The room brightened. The pressure was gone. I stood there, hands trembling, staring at my own reflection in the dark screen. Except, it wasn't my reflection. Not exactly. The visor's reflection showed my suit, my face. But behind me, just barely visible, was something tall and thin, draped in what looked like bone-white strands of silk or tendons. Its face, if you could call it that, was like an eclipse. A void where light disappeared entirely. When I turned, there was nothing, but the reflection stayed for just a moment longer, and it tilted its head, like was curious, or amused. I sealed off the entire western wing of the station after that. Whatever it wasn't trying to get in, not anymore, because it already was. I don't remember falling asleep. I only remember waking up with my helmet on, sealed, and frost creeping across the inside of my visor. That, and the sound of something breathing in the room with me. Not a recording, not an echo. I could feel the draw and push of air, even though the airlock was shut, and my own oxygen scrubbers were hissing steadily in my ears. I knew there was something else, alive and close. I didn't move at first. I didn't want to. Because whatever it was waiting for me to notice it. You know that feeling you get when you know someone's watching you? Like the air is thicker, that electric crawl just beneath your skin? I felt that, except it didn't go away. It just got worse the longer I pretended not to notice. Finally, I turned my head, slowly, toward the dark corner of the room. Nothing. just the edge of the storage module, a few stacked crates, my maintenance locker. And then it shifted. A shape, tall, slight, wrong. It stood perfectly still, halfway obscured by the shadows, but there was no mistaking it. It wasn't there a second ago, and then it blinked. Not with eyelids. I don't think it had any, but with that strange, eclipse-like void where a face should be. A pulse of darkness that swallowed light around it, then returned. I bolted, fumbled with the emergency hatch, slammed it shut, and staggered into the corridor, falling against the wall as my legs gave out. I lay there for what felt like hours, just listening for any sound. But the station was quiet again, quiet like a grave. After that, I didn't go back into the central module for 2 days. I slept sitting up in the passage between the med bay and engineering, helmet on, suit sealed, oxygen running in short bursts to conserve power. And still, I dreamed of it. That shape, that thing. Sometimes in the corner of my vision, sometimes right in front of me, always watching. Not like a predator, like a scientist, like it wanted to understand me. I started checking the oxygen readings every hour, and something caught my eye. A steady increase in carbon dioxide in sections that should have been sealed off, like someone else was breathing inside the habitat. At first, I thought maybe it was a leak, a slow bleed from my own suit. But no. The log showed pulses of pressure increases that corresponded to my sleeping periods. It came when I was unconscious, and sometimes it left things behind. The first time, it was subtle. My glove, the one with the torn seam I'd patched on day 3, had been moved, placed neatly on the console, palms open, like an offering. The second time, it was worse. I woke up to find a series of crescent-shaped indentations scratched into the metal beside my cot. They weren't made with a tool. They were dug in with fingers, deep, sharp, measured. 12 of them, all pointing toward my sleeping position. I started keeping logs again, this time audio only. Here's a piece from the 5th night. Long recorded commitment. Semra, Ria Mori, Modula Magnum entry, entry 5. Time stable, unknown. I think it's studying me, watching how I react. It doesn't attack, doesn't try to communicate in any traditional way, but it leaves marks, rearranges things. Sometimes I feel like it's teaching me something, or testing me. I don't know what it wants, but I think it knows I'm afraid. I tried to destroy the footage. Every camera on the outpost had gone dark since our arrival, but I managed to reroute one of the external drones, one that had survived the crash. The video feed was blurry, distorted by radiation, but I caught something on the far edge of the lunar ridge, something that shimmered in the sunless dust. Not a reflection, not debris. It moved against the light, almost like it absorbed it. I froze the frame, zoomed, enhanced what little I could. The image that stared back at me wasn't clear, but the silhouette, it was tall, slender, limbs too long, head cocked to one side, like it knew I was looking at it, like it wanted me to. The station isn't mine anymore. I don't think it ever was. Maybe it never belonged to us, not to humans. We just built Omega on top of something far older, something hidden, buried beneath the surface, dormant until we opened the wrong hatch or drove the wrong drill. We thought the moon was empty. We were brown, and now, every time I sleep, I wake up just a little farther from where I lay down, a few inches, sometimes feet. Once, I woke up inside the comms bay, sealed inside with no memory of getting there. No, I don't think I'm moving. I think it's rearranging me, like I'm part of its experiment now. The signal drew me to the crater, not the original impact crater where the module came down. No, this was farther out, east, beyond the line of sight from Outpost Omega. I hadn't noticed it before, likely because the terrain mapping system glitched after the crash. But when I reviewed the short-range sensor sweeps from the rover, there it was. A wide depression, perfectly circular, almost too perfect. It wasn't natural, couldn't have been. No satellite pass or orbital mapping ever mentioned a structure like this. It was nearly 300 meters across, but only a few dozen deep, and the soil composition around it was off, lighter, looser, almost like freshly turned soil, and something beneath it, something massive, was emitting faint electromagnetic pulses. I shouldn't have gone out there. I know that now, but I was desperate for answers, and even more desperate to get away from the thing inside Omega that kept rearranging my life. I prepped the rover, brought oxygen tanks, a portable EM field recorder, the seismic probe, and my helmet camera, the last still functioning piece of my suit's onboard system. It took me 2 hours to reach the crater's edge. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. The moon is always silent, sure, but this was a deeper kind of quiet. Even the vibration of the rover's wheels on the regolith felt muffled, like the ground was absorbing the sound instead of reflecting it, like something duty didn't want to be heard. I stepped out and approached the rim. The soil gave under my boots like sponge cake, not dry dust, but something with give. That's when I heard it. A low, guttural draw-in of air, followed by a long, slow exhale. I froze, not just because of the sound, but because the ground beneath my feet shifted with it. Just a fraction of an inch, but it rose and fell in time with the sound, like I was standing on the chest of a sleeping giant. It wasn't possible. I knew that. The moon had no air, no weather, no life, nothing that could produce a breath, let alone something that could shift tons of regolith like the swell of a lung. But it did it again, and again. I backed away slowly, not daring to turn my back on the crater. Then my suit's comms crackled. Rhea. A voice, not my own, not from Earth, not from any of the other crew. They were gone, long gone. But it used my name. Not a greeting, not a scream, just a statement. Like it was checking, making sure I was still here. Rhea, watches. That was the last thing it said. But the tone, the texture of that voice, it sounded like my own. Warped, slurred, like it had been pulled through 1,000 layers of static and spat back out. All wrong. I left the crater. I didn't run. You can't on the moon. But I walked faster than I should have, almost flipping the rover trying to get it turned around. The sound of breathing didn't stop when I left the rim. It followed me. Every 100 meters or so, I'd feel it again, that push-pull underfoot, like the entire landscape was shifting just slightly, subtly, as if I was still on the surface of something alive. Back at the outpost, I reviewed the audio from my suit mic. The waveform was there, plain as day. Not interference, not feedback. Actual sound, low frequency, sustained, organic. I played it back in a loop, slowing it each time. By the 5th pass, I could hear a pattern. The rhythm of the breath had spaces, gaps, and in those gaps, a voice, whispering in reverse. Not words I could parse, just a phlegmy, phasing murmur that made my teeth ache and the base of my skull throb. Whatever was beneath that crater wasn't just breathing. It was speaking, and I think the moon is its lung. I tried sleeping after that. I made the mistake of letting myself close my eyes. I dreamt I was back at the crater, only this time it wasn't dry. It was open, wet, ribbed like the inside of a throat. I stood at the edge and looked down, and it blinked at me. A pupil the size of a house, glossy and black, set in a wall of glistening red tissue. It wasn't a crater. It was an eye, and I was standing on its lid. I woke with blood in my nose and a word on my lips I don't remember learning. CTA. I don't know what it means. I looked it up in every onboard system. No matches. Not even on the ancient linguistic databases. But I think it's what it calls me now. What it thinks I am. Not a visitor. Not a trespasser. A passenger. 'Cause I don't think I'm alone inside my own head anymore. Something from beneath the crater breathed into me. And I don't think I came back alone. After the dream, the crater, the eye, the whisper of Cathanon, I barely slept. My head throbbed, like I'd swallowed radio static, and my ears rang with that low, slow breathing from under the moon's surface. I stayed in the outpost, sealed the door, disabled the external sensors, shut off the lights, Even pulled the auxiliary life support offline just to feel more disconnected. I figured if I shut out the signals, maybe whatever was trying to get into my head would quiet down. It didn't. Around the 12th hour of isolation, I noticed something wrong with the dust patterns in the airlock. The moon doesn't exactly have wind, but over time you learn how your environment settles, how dust disperses, how your boots leave prints. But these prints, they were fresh, not just from the dust displacement, but from condensation on the suit locker's interior wall, like someone had been wet on the moon. That's not possible. It shouldn't be. And yet, the suit locker's hatch was slightly ajar. I always seal it. Habit. Protocol drilled into me from the first day admission training. The only time I don't seal the locker is when I'm wearing the suit. And I wasn't. I was in my base layer. Suit was right there, hanging in the rack, helmet perched on its magnetic cradle. Only the gloves were missing. They weren't on the ground. Not on the suit's belt, not stored away, just gone. And worse, the suit's biometric data showed recent usage. It had been worn for 42 minutes. Pressure log, heat dispersal, even heart rate readings. But I was in the outpost the whole time. I checked the internal surveillance footage. There was a gap, exactly 42 minutes, total signal blackout. The cameras cut out, then resumed as if nothing happened. I checked the hatch logs. The outpost door never opened, meaning if the suit had gone outside, it didn't use the door. And if it didn't go outside, then it walked around inside the station. That's when I noticed the footprints. They looped around the storage crates, through the galley, into the comms room, back to the suit locker, then stopped, not faded, not smudged, just stopped, like whatever made them had vanished into the air, or something wearing my suit had stepped out of it. I pulled the helmet from the cradle, checked the inside. Danol condensation. Again. More than that. Scratches. Long, deliberate lines etched into the inner visor, 6 of them. Like claws had raked across it from the inside. Whatever it was, it had been looking out. I went to the comms room, booted the long-range signal array. I had to get a message out, to anyone, to Earth, to any frequency that would listen. That's when I saw it. On the wall mount monitor, the rear exterior cam, still functional, showed someone standing at the edge of the base perimeter, wearing my suit. But at first I thought maybe the data had just lagged, a delayed feed from when I'd last used it. But the timestamp was live, and the thing in the suit, it moved, tilted its head, bent unnaturally to one side, not a human gesture, more like a marionette learning how joints work. I zoomed in. Its helmet was cracked, split straight down the middle like someone had peeled it open, but instead of depressurizing or freezing, it just stood there, motionless, like it didn't need air anymore. Then it waved, a slow, crooked arc of the arm, like someone mocking a human gesture, not to greet me, to tell me it was watching. I scrambled to shut the feed off, but not before it moved again. One moment it was outside. The next, the camera glitched, and the suit was gone. I spun around. The airlock was sealed, the hatch secured, but the room felt full, like I wasn't alone. I sat in the corner with the emergency beacon in one hand and the arc welder in the other, watching the walls, listening to the hum of recycled air and the occasional creak of metal cooling in the artificial warmth. Then, right as I was drifting towards sleep, I heard it, from somewhere inside the vents. "Let me wear you again," my voice. But wrong, too deep, drawn out like a whisper echoing through lungs not built for breath. I stayed awake the rest of the cycle. My helmet stayed sealed, the suit locked away. But I know it's not enough. The thing in the suit, the skinwalker in the dust, doesn't need the suit anymore. It just wants me to know it wore it, that it walked in my footsteps, that it knows how my body fits. And I think it's trying to fit me from the inside now. I made a choice. It wasn't brave. It wasn't calculated. It was desperate. I couldn't stay sealed inside Outpost Omega forever, pretending it wasn't already inside. The thing that wore my suit, the thing that tried to wear me, wasn't waiting anymore. It was learning to mimic, learning my voice, my gait, my movements. At one point, I heard the click of the galley coffee module trying to boot up, something I hadn't touched in weeks. Then the sound of my own voice saying, "Damn thing's still busted." Pitch perfect. Only I hadn't said a word. I rigged the signal array, boosted power from every auxiliary battery we had left. If I was going to send a message, it had to punch through the interference, and through the thing listening to me from inside the walls. The message wasn't long. "This is Little Commander Hale, Lunar Survey Mission Epsilon 7. I am alone. The others are dead. The moon is not uninhabited. It never was. Something's under the surface. Something old. It mimics. It learns. Do not come here. Do not answer transmissions from the moon. Do not trust familiar voices. If I don't make..." And then, the whisper behind me, "Don't finish the message." My own voice. I turned. Nothing. Just the comms console, the blinking light of the outbound signal still streaming. The hairs on my arms stood up. My suit's internal temperature plummeted. The walls began to breathe. Not literally, but I felt it. A slow in and out pressure, like the entire station was inhaling me. And then it spoke again. Not from behind me this time, from inside me. "You've looked at the moon too long, Hale." It's looked back. My skin crawled. I ran, helmet sealed, suit depressurized. I hit the airlock override and blasted out into the endless gray, heart pounding as the black above stretched in all directions. I didn't know where I was going, only away from the outpost, away from the voice. I ran until the landscape changed beneath my boots, until I was in the place I never meant to return to. The crater, the one from the dream. Only, it wasn't a dream. The rocks were arranged in a pattern, not random, but etched deliberately. Concentric rings, spiral grooves that led downward. A design that didn't belong on any human map. I stood at the edge, breath ragged, staring down into a pit darker than night itself. And then it rose. Not a creature, not really. More like a shadow made real. A hole torn open in space that had chosen a shape to mock me. Long limbs, warped body, face stretched like rubber, wearing a twisted mirror of my own expression. It smiled. With my smile. Then it opened its mouth and I heard everyone. My captain, my crew, myself. All layered in a single monstrous tone that said, "Welcome home, Cathanaut." As I stumbled backward, my boot caught a ridge. I fell hard, air knocked from my lungs as my visor cracked along the side, but no air escaped. Instead, something came in, a hiss, like breath, from the moon. I crawled. I don't remember how far, but eventually I made it back to the signal tower. The backup one, deep in the auxiliary pit, not meant for human access, not unless everything else failed. Then everything else had. I triggered the final burst. One packet, compressed, encoded in every language we had. One final message. The moon is not dead. It only sleeps. It watches. It wears your skin. Do not respond to lunar signals. Repeat, do not respond. That was 43 minutes ago. The air is getting thinner. The backup oxygen is gone. My hands are too cold to hold the tools. My heartbeat sounds off, slower. Not like it's fading, more like it's matching a rhythm I hear from under the ground. The moon is humming. It's waiting, and I think it's about to wake up. So if you're hearing this, turn off your radio. Don't listen to the whispers. Don't answer the voice that sounds like me, because it isn't me anymore. And the next voice you hear from the moon will already be inside you.